Awesome. Okay. Well, hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for your patience. I've never been more frustrated with or enamored with technology during these times. So thanks for your patience. Really appreciate it. Again, thank you for taking the time to join us today. I say this often. I know that you are inundated with Zoom calls and meetings, but this is really the time to learn and to take the time. So knowing how busy everybody is right now, we appreciate it. We've got a huge group today. So I'm just gonna give you a couple of housekeeping items. Q&A is gonna be at the end, but don't forget your question or your comment. Laura and I will make sure that we capture your questions and comments. We will address them at the very end and make sure we leave ample time for questions, and I know there will be quite a few from you. You are muted on entry. I think that's pretty typical. Any technical issues, reach out to Laura. Clearly, I'm not that person to help you out. I was pretty much useless while we were having these technology issues, so please reach out to Laura using the chat function and we can help you out with that. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Geeta Cartwright. I joined RPS 3 wonderful years ago. I look after the broker channel and the broker strategy nationally. It's an amazing role, and my passion for the broker channel, I get to explore that every day. It's fantastic. Our keynote speaker today is Stacey Thompson, and she joined us at RPS in 2019. We're so thrilled to have her. She looks after the business transformation, and I'm going to read this because I don't want to miss anything, but she is responsible for transforming RPS's business for our financial institutional clients and appraisers, appraiser partners alike. She works on new technologies and solutions that improve the customer experience. It's something that, you know, we are so lucky to have her, because not only does she help us with all these amazing initiatives, she is a CRA designated member of the Appraisal Institute of Canada. She's worked as a field appraiser in Alberta, and she's held senior appraiser positions with 2 major Canadian financial institutions. So certainly an amazing resource for us at RPS, and she's got some amazing information she's going to share with you today. And with that, Stacey, I'm going to pass it over to you. Thanks so much. Oh, Stacey, you're on mute. I know you had great stuff to share. We just can't hear you saying it. There you go.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Sorry. The Wi-Fi at the office today is certainly not up to up to snuff. So I'll give you just a quick overview of the agenda for today, if my computer would catch up. But so thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We really, as Geeta said, appreciate how busy everyone is. You know, the markets are in unprecedented times. So for you to set this time aside to join us is incredible. RPS is very excited to present to you some insights into the housing market after the very interesting past year that we've had. We'll first take a look at the interesting trends that have been noted, and we'll also do a quick overview of the national housing market and performance overall, and also address some regional differences that have been identified. Finally, we're going to dive into the estimated market values submitted by customers and the difference between their expectations and the actual appraised values, and what that means for customers, brokers, and lenders on the application. And at the end of the presentation, you'll have an opportunity to ask us any questions that you have. So on the next slide here, I think this one's very interesting because at the beginning of the sort of pandemic, there was a lot of talk about what the economic recovery was going to look like, whether or not it would be a hockey stick shape, whether or not it would be a V, whether or not it would be a W. And what we've seen here is that the resale market has been a V. So we saw at the beginning of the pandemic quite a drop in resale properties, and a lot of that was because of the stay-at-home orders, lockdown, uncertainty as to what that meant for the actual showings of properties. People were sort of holding off, unsure if they were going to lose their jobs. So demand is strong for existing homes nationally, and as I said, during the initial stages, May to March 2020, you can see that significant drop in terms of activity. But since then, when the restrictions were eased and the market started to show signs of strengthening, many realized that they could work remotely in an effective manner, and others realized they wanted more space. So we take a look at this graph, and we think there's a lot of people who realized I don't need to be stuck in a condo in a city. We see a lot of people who are perhaps living with their parents because of sort of rapidly increasing housing prices over the last few years, who had finally saved up enough money and realized I can't live in my parents' basement forever. And a lot of couples who decided they wanted to expand their family. So after that initial drop, we've seen activity spike to the highest levels that we've seen for a very long time. If you look at the graph on the right, though, when we look at the active resale listings, we see that they're continuing to fall. And what this is sort of the relationship that we see here is a lot of people who were not home buyers or homeowners who are not putting their property on the market as they were looking to buy another property. So there's a lot more buyers in the market, but not as much active listings coming on, because we've got a whole load of net new home buyers coming into the market. So if you take a look on the bottom graph there on the left, you can see that there's people who are non-owners, and you take a look at those percentages who are planning to buy within the next few sort of weeks or months or years, as opposed to the actual owners. And we see the percentages of non-owners significantly higher than those that are actual owners. So the resale market, again, dipped very briefly, but it's now at an all-time high in terms of activity levels. So if we go to the next slide, we can see that national house prices continue to rise on an accelerated path. So we've seen them go up 12.1% over the past 12 months to an average price nationally of $659,000. When we take a look at the following slide, this shows the difference between the weighted average of the 13 major metropolitan areas, which is the dark blue line, and the national 3,500 metros that we actually record and offer statistics on. So the 13 major metros have historically seen rapid price appreciation in a different way than we've seen the outlying areas. So the major metros would be Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Ottawa. But now we're seeing the weighted average of the price appreciation dropping below what we've seen for the 3,500 other metros. So a lot of that goes to support people moving out of the cities. This is not a trend that just started with COVID. It started, I guess, 2017, 2016, when people started realizing that house prices within the inner city were far outside of their actual affordability levels. But we're now seeing these prices, the average price jump far more quickly for the 3,500 metro areas. So they've still been pushing people, the values have still been pushing up, but we're seeing these outlying areas increase at a far more rapid rate than the weighted average of the 13 major metropolitan centers. So this is very well displayed on the next graph that we're showing you here. So we've got the 13 major metros, which are highlighted in blue. The two red bars show the 13 major metropolitan areas, and then we've also got the 3,500. So what we can see is that the national 3,500, from a growth standpoint overall, is exceeding that of the national 13. We also see that markets showing significant growth outside of the major centers like Hamilton, Ottawa, and Halifax, with Hamilton being the highest year-over-year growth city within the country over the past year. So in this graph, we can also see that Eastern Canada, the value appreciation year over year is certainly going on a more accelerated pace than the Western counterparts, with the exception of Vancouver. So we break that down further on the next slide to a regional basis. So Vancouver is still the most expensive city in the country from an aggregate average price standpoint, showing growth of 13.6 year over year. Victoria is also increasing at 6.9. And for the first time in a while, Calgary and Edmonton are showing positive growth year over year after years of sort of some stability, maybe a bit of price decline. So certainly that's some good news for the Western provinces. And then of note is Winnipeg, which is showing year over year growth of 7.5% overall. And what we see in Winnipeg is certainly a boom. There's perhaps not the housing stock, so they're starting to get into some housing shortages as well, with the demand of people again looking to buy and capitalizing on the ability to actually own with lower interest rates. If we go to the next slide, it takes a look at the eastern half of Canada, which includes Toronto. So Toronto continues to dominate in terms of average value, but the growth percentage is quite a bit lower than what we've seen in other areas. So 12% year over year growth for Toronto. The value is high. The actual growth percentage is exceeded by Hamilton, which is at 17.4% year over year, and Ottawa is at 16.5%. So we're seeing, again, the shift away from the major cities, and a lot of that having to do with the ability to work from home. Not to be overlooked, though, is Halifax, which, again, the Atlantic provinces have not really shown significant price growth over the past few years, but Halifax, since the beginning of the pandemic, over the past year, has really started to boom from a purchase standpoint and demand. And we've also seen incredible demand within the Quebec marketplace. It continues to be hot, and there's areas outside of Montreal and Quebec City are seeing significant increases in demand and prices. So if we take a look at the next slide, so the picture across the province and the initial headline of house prices at 659,000 seems simple. Intuitively, we all know that it's more complex than just that. We actively monitor house prices for roughly 1,500 FSAs across the country and report on 6 different property styles. Following slides going to go into more detail about region and property styles. So on this slide here, we can see that it's the aggregate national numbers. Sorry, back to that one. Yep. So we've mapped out single family, detached, and condos. And we've seen historically, if you look at the top left of this chart, that they've pretty much been hand in hand in terms of growth rates. There's a little bit of like back and forth amongst who's got the highest growth percentage year over year. But in 2020, we started to see the 2 different property types have diverging paths. So again, I just want to make sure that everyone knows, looking at this slide, that we're not saying that condo prices are decreasing. That's not what this slide is saying. It's saying that the percentage of growth year over year is not as strong as it has been historically. And we're seeing the growth percentage of single family homes outstrip the condo growth. So the difference in growth rates continues to widen. And again, as many people move out of the city, there's less demand within the city for condominiums. The national single family home price has certainly increased as people continue to move further out from the city centers. So again, condos aren't decreasing in terms of overall price. They're just growing at a slower rate. So I don't want anyone to walk away from this and put alarm bells in anyone's head that prices are declining. If we go to the next slide, we've broken it down by the 13 major metropolitan areas. And again, Hamilton overall for property price growth on an aggregate basis is leading the pack. Ottawa and Montreal are 2 of the hottest markets in terms of volume, and that's not surprising. But when you take a look at the differences between single family home prices and condos, when we break down further, we can see again that the percentage growth is not as high for condos in some of these markets, keeping in mind that cities like Regina and Saskatoon don't have the volume of condos, so the numbers might be a little bit skewed there as opposed to the major cities. But Hamilton continues to outpace the competition. Ottawa's very, very strong. Vancouver, still from an aggregate basis, remains the most expensive city in the country. And this is sort of a good descriptor of what's happening within the different markets and the different property styles. If we go to the next slide, this was interesting, and I'm sure many of you have seen this slide. It was created based on a Google search document that was put out over the past few weeks, and it shows the most searched locations for properties across Canada. As we've seen in the news, many people are looking to move outside of the downtown centers across the country as working remotely has become the norm. So this slide shows the average single family house price in some of those most searched communities on the left. So we look at Port Moody, Surrey, Abbotsford, Clarington, Ottawa, getting into some smaller cities within Quebec, Kawartha Lakes. These are all areas where we've seen demand go through the roof. We've also seen the year-over-year price growth on the right. So we see Laval again showing 22% or 27% year-over-year growth, and the average price going up certainly quite a bit since then. So based on this Google search and our stats that we can show from a property appreciation standpoint, we can see that a lot of the value increases in demand are certainly happening well outside of the city centers. On the next slide, we can further demonstrate this with Toronto as the example. So this is one example of how house price appreciation in communities surrounding Toronto are varying. Looking to the west, London is dominating growth of nearly 20% year-over-year property price appreciation. Newmarket, north of Toronto, is also leading the pack, and moving east, we see the Durham region is definitely very rapidly increasing. So again, the benchmark line in the center there, Toronto at 10.42% price appreciation. We can see almost all of these communities on the outskirts are now outpacing Toronto in terms of average property year-over-year growth. And again, the Toronto condo line shows again just slight, I guess, negative growth for this last quarter. But again, Toronto, we're seeing Toronto is being far outpaced, having led sort of the real estate market in Ontario for the last few years. Over the last year or so, we've started to see these outlying communities really pick up the pace in terms of price growth. So now on to sort of the most important part that's not really touched on very often. Over 26% of estimated market values that are submitted by any of our broker partners, lender partners, are off by more than 10% of the appraised value. So that is definitely an interesting stat as we look to sort of understand customer expectations, deal with, values and applications within rapidly appreciating and crazy marketplaces that we've all been experiencing for the last year. So if we look on the next slide here, this is a summary of the past 3 years. So what this shows us is over the past 3 years, 66% of applications were submitted with an estimated market value that was within plus minus 10% of the actual appraised value. So 43% were within 5%. So again, keeping in mind that this encompasses both purchase and refinance applications, which we'll touch on the next few slides. Over the last 3 years, 26% significantly overestimated the value of their property. So it was 11, the estimated market value was at least 11% higher than the actual appraised value. Typically, this happens, we'll see on the next few slides, you would expect that it would be on refinances, but what we also need to consider is that we've got rapidly appreciating markets in which the comparable sales, overbidding, price wars would all factor into that. And only 8% of the applications underestimated the value significantly. So that would be saying that the estimated market value came in well below the actual appraised value. So again, it's difficult to dig into those ones. As we all know, it doesn't typically happen in our industry where the estimated value is considerably below the appraised value. But that's certainly something that we'll dig into on the next page. So this next set of charts here is based on the past 12 months. So from a national standpoint, over the past year, we've seen the largest percentage of values coming in within plus minus 10% of the appraised value, which is great. So that would be the 3 green bars on each of the charts. So the one on the left is purchases, the one on the right is refinances. We see a dramatically different picture between purchases and refinances, however. So for refinances, customers are estimating the value to be higher than the actual appraised value 45% of the time. So that would be everything to the right. So the furthest right green bar plus the red. Of these instances, the largest green bar on the first chart is within plus 10 or minus 10% of the appraised value. But that again signals that there could be overbidding within the marketplace and still cause considerable implications from an underwriting standpoint. So what this could mean when the value comes in light on purchase or refinance applications is that there's re-adjudication, deals need to be reworked, secondary property offers that someone might be submitting specifically on refinances might come in short. So the implications of coming in light on the purchase price or the estimated market value, even within 10%, just causes a headache for everyone. And the key is to understand sort of what's going on in the market. Is it because they were overbidding? Is it because the customer has unrealistic expectations? Was it an emotional purchase? There's many things that go into this. But for purchases, the amount of values coming in at the EMV is significantly higher. So 36% of the time, the estimated market value and the appraised value are aligned, as opposed to refinances where we're just at just over 10%. What's interesting to note though is 41% of the values coming in less than the purchase price are still within 1 to 10%, which again puts further support onto overactive markets. For refinances, we see the percentages coming in quite a bit lower than the customer's expectations most of the time. We've then broken this down regionally on this next slide. And again, so we've got Alberta and BC on this slide. So 30% were within 10% for refinances, and another 16 were greater than 11%. For purchases, a smaller number of estimated market values were outside of 10%, but still a significant amount, 55%, were below the appraised value, suggesting an active market in multiple bid scenarios. For BC refinances, 9%. Sorry, I just read the wrong stats there. So that was BC. So for the estimated market value versus the sale purchase price, and appraised value in BC, that again is suggesting an overactive market. 9% were within the client's EMV in BC. 37% showed an EMV that was about 1 to 10% higher than the actual appraised value. And conversely, on the purchases, 33% supported the purchase price, while 46% came in close but didn't support. So again, we can see in Alberta, slowing market conditions on the sale prices seems to be a bit of an outlier there. Again, it's not really been a multiple bid market over the last few years. So this one's a little bit sort of questionable. And what we sort of take away from this one, and we're going to look to do a bit of digging, is whether or not that relates to acreage properties. We all know we get into the house and 10-acre scenario, excess acreage, outbuildings. So that's certainly something that we're going to dig into a bit more internally, because from a purchase standpoint, you would think Alberta's been relatively flat for the last few years. So that's certainly a bit of an anomaly. On the next slide, in Ontario, we see that the refinance estimates came in considerably undervalued 43% of the time. So that is the 4 bars to the right, so the green and the reds, less than the customer's expectations. So this is definitely a bit of a challenge. Everyone knows that Ontario's been certainly a super active market. And again, with any refinance application, we see the customer looking at listings on the street, but not actually getting the details on what the actual sale price was. So we do have customers come in after scouring the internet and not really understanding the market with unrealistic expectations about what the values should actually be. For purchases, a large amount also showed a supported value at 42%, but there are significant shortfalls noted. So again, suggestions of overactive markets, people buying emotionally, multiple bids, and just sort of taking away from this what we can do from a customer expectation standpoint to make sure that we've, again, helped structure the applications properly. The customer has the finances to come up with the additional amounts when they go into multiple offer situations, and sort of understanding what that means from a financing standpoint. When we look at the Quebec marketplace, again, the sale versus purchase numbers is quite astronomical here. Again, a factor of overactive markets, limited demand, or limited supply, excessive demand. And this one here, again, jumps out at me based on all of the charts, just showing what's going on in the Quebec market and sort of how we can temper customer expectations there, make sure that we're properly setting the right expectations up front. So I believe that's it for my piece. I'm sure we're going to get into some questions about what we've seen in these graphs and sort of what the future looks like, but I will let Gita take it on now for the next few minutes.
Awesome. Thank you. That's such that's a lot of information. And I know we did go through it really quickly. We're trying to jam a lot of stuff in. Please, if you've got any questions or if you need any further clarification, like I said, we'll get through my piece and we'll make sure we open it up to questions afterwards. So Laura, if you don't mind, I just wanted to go back to the slide that shows our sister companies. I just want to give a little background before I jump into this stuff. I just wanted to make sure that we got through Laura, through Stacy's information first. That's the stuff that you're really here for. But what I wanted to sort of showcase for some of you is that we have our sister companies. We're a Brookfield company, but we have part of our family now is not only Royal LePage, but most recently Sagen, formerly Genworth. And I think what we want to show you with this is that there is a significant amount of real estate data and intelligence that we have at our disposal. And what we want to do is share that with you. And, now more than ever, it's become, very important to share this data and what are the trends looking like coast to coast. If you can go to the next slide, Laura, that's just the one on our sort of our value proposition. I'll go into that very quickly, a bit of a commercial from RPS. We have what's called price certainty. So a lot of you that have experienced dealing with RPS already, you know that we don't come back on pricing. When we've had a negotiation with our appraisers at the front end of the process, so that those prices have already been negotiated. We're not going to have any surprises or that back and forth between you and your client. We also have a broker support team because when we launched this a few months ago, knowing how unique your situations are and your questions, it's very different than the retail space. So we will make sure that at the end of the presentation, we post that 800 number and the email that you can send directly to our folks. And you're likely going to get me for most of the part, because as you can imagine, Stacey was talking about what a hot market, busy market we're in right now. So we're all kind of all hands on deck. And then valuable data, which is what I'm going to share with you in just a second. Laura, if you wouldn't mind going to the slide that we just kind of left off on after Stacey finished. Thank you. And sorry for the jumping around, guys. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, one more up and right there. Okay, so these are ways that we sort of help support you through the process. And I will do a bit of a plug here that RPS, we were fortunate enough to work with MPC this year, and we do have an accredited webinar that we will be showcasing for the first time in May. And this webinar will be talking a lot about the essential information in an appraisal report, how to read it, how to understand the content, the comparables, what are the definitions, and then how do you manage that client relationship afterwards. And I think Stacey kind of alluded to that, where because the market is very, very active, sometimes we get comparisons in the market that aren't apples to apples. And I know our love for real estate makes us look at it as that, you know, we just love real estate. So here are the comparables. And a lot of times when our appraisers are now looking at the new comparables, if you are doing a value appeal in some of those situations, they're missing the mark a little bit in terms of having, you know, similar type properties, but we can certainly go into that and talk more about that as well. So even just being on a webinar like this, that means you're really trying to understand what the market, so you can have those conversations and set those expectations with your clients. And then preparing the client for the appraisal process. I mean, it's different today. We've been a year in this virtual world, and, you know, how do we prepare our clients for what the appraiser is going to be asking for? You know, it's almost like they're staging their own home, because they're going to be taking photos, unlocking gates, putting pets kind of aside, so that if the appraiser, when they do their external view of the property, they're not encumbered by anything inside the home. You know, clean up the clutter. Everything is just kind of making the pathway clear, so the appraiser can get as good a view on the property. A really great best practice, one of my brokers says, you know, when they're doing the pictures, it's not just the electrical panel, it's everything on the inside of it. So be very thorough. And that way, it's better to have too many photos than not enough. The appraiser will know which ones to use and which ones they don't need, but certainly more is better, and a very clear shot of that. And then knowing the client expectations. It's interesting because we launched House Price Tracker a year ago, and isn't it interesting that now we have so many conversations around client expectations of what their value of their property is. So I'm going to jump right into that right now and talk about House Price Tracker for those of you that haven't used it yet. So Laura, if you don't mind going to the next page. Okay, perfect. So a year ago, we launched House Price Tracker, and this is a report that provides your clients with updated estimated values of their home. And what we did was, back in January of 2020, we launched it. So for every full appraisal that you ordered, every 6 months for 5 years, you're going to get this amazing little PDF that you can see here on the screen. It's going to have your client name, the picture, and it's going to say, you know, hey, customer, we sent it to you, obviously. And it says, this is what, after 6 months, your property has done in terms of the trending in the prices. It's a fantastic report. And for me, what a great client retention tool, because every 6 months now, pretty much the biggest investment of your clients' lives, you're going to be able to provide them with an updated value. So this is also what I think is a bit of a client lead generation tool. But as we started, you know, sharing these reports, the feedback was amazing. And then COVID hit a year ago, and I don't think any of us thought we'd still be here a year later, but here we are. So we got together very quickly and thought, well, how else can we come to our brokers from a point of a service? How can we help? And now we offer House Price Tracker on demand, which means that as long as you log into the RPS portal, you can actually access this report for any of your clients without having to order a full appraisal. So how great, especially in a refinance position, that you can have these conversations ahead of time as to what the expectation might be. Normally we would do a live demo of this, but I think with technology today, I'm happy to do this offline with any of you. Please reach out and we'll go through it. But I'm just too scared to start messing around with the computer. So this is what it looks like. You get into our portal, RPS Access. If you're already logged in with us, it's on the main page. It's on the right-hand side. It just says House Price Tracker. Click on that so you can see on the left-hand side. And I know it's small, guys, but it's going to have a map. And as you start typing the address for your client's home, it's gonna focus in on the address of your client. So instead of having a picture of the home, in this case, because we're doing it on demand, it's just going to show the map. It needs to be validated by Canada Post because we need to make sure that that property exists. If you're in a very rural area, maybe it's a PO box, rural route number, that can be a little challenging when it comes to Canada Post. So try your best to get a more detailed address. If you have any issues, by all means, let me know. But there are some areas that can be a little challenging, but this is coast to coast, so you shouldn't have any difficulty. Once you've got the address, you need to let us know what type of property it is. So single family, is it a condo? And I'll explain why in a second. Then we need to know the last time it was appraised or purchased. So if your folks are doing a refinance, what was the last time it was appraised and what did it come in at? Because we use our house price index data that tells us what the property should be worth, given the timeline and where it started from. A lot of times brokers will tell me that they play around with the numbers. I wasn't really sure about the purchase price or last appraised value, so I put in an amount, I played with the date, just so you know that that kind of changes the integrity of the data. So you really need to know, okay, what was that property valued at and how long ago? And it can't really, this information is updated every 30 days. So it's not an AVM. So you can't plug in a property that's on sale at the moment to see what the value is because we don't have any history. So you do need to have that information. You kind of put that in. You can also include a renovation. And because we launched this very quickly, I know people have done many renovations to their properties, but choose the biggest one and the one that has the most impact. And I will let you know that this is also indexed, but it also depreciates. So if your folks did a kitchen reno 5 years ago, it may not have obviously the same type of value today as if it had been done a year ago. Once you input this, you hit generate report. And then what you see here, this is what's going to pop up. It's a really nice, very slick PDF of what the house price tracker report looks like. The only difference between the two types of ways that you get this report, one of them with the house here that you can see, that's the one you're going to get automatically when you order a full appraisal through RPS, because we have that information. We have your client info and we have the picture of the property. When you do it kind of on demand, we don't have that client name or the picture of the property. So, but you can, save it, send it to your client, personalize it that way with however header you want to do that. But it looks fantastic. The report gives them an idea of what the value of their home is at the moment. It also talks about the neighborhood and different types of property types, which I love, because if I'm having a conversation with a client and they're looking at upsizing or downsizing, maybe they're looking at moving from a single family into a condo. What a great conversation piece to say. Now you can confidently talk about what is the market doing for those types of property types as well. So this is, to me, a great client retention tool. What better way to reach out to your clients automatically, whether or not it's through the full appraisal or just you're thinking of them, go through your database. Maybe you've had a conversation. So it's almost a lead generation and a client retention tool. And I know that, I'm a homeowner and I don't ever recall someone sending me something that says, hey, I'm looking out for your investment, which is your piece of real estate. And this is what it's doing right now, if you ever want to have a conversation. So I'm happy to go through it. If anyone wants any further information on this product, there's no cost for you to use this. So certainly please use it. please let me know, and we would love your feedback because we've made some significant changes just based on your feedback. Laura, do we have another slide after this one? I want to make sure we leave some time for questions. Okay, I'm going to leave this up for a second. This is kind of how you reach us, how you sign up for webinars. So, you know, we would love to see you at our accredited webinars. Please stay tuned. We have a great economic power panel coming up. This is the 1-866 number that you can reach our folks at head office. And then, of course, this is the email if you have any sort of order support questions regarding your order. Laura, could I ask, I know the chat's been, I've seen some things come through. Maybe are there any questions? I know Stacy's back on. So are there any questions that you've seen? I'm just looking through the chat. I don't want to miss anything.
Yeah, so there was a question from Julie, and it was on the Ontario EMV, which is appraised value. So Laura, if we can go back to that slide quickly. So Julie's question was, it looks to be 13% over for refinances and 12% for purchases, but I had mentioned 43 and 42%. So yeah, the key is on this one, if you take a look on the Ontario top chart and then the Ontario bottom chart, it's showing 13 and 12. But the total of 43 and 42 is when you include that green bar just to the left of that, where it's come in 1 to 10% below the EMV. So the total of appraised values coming in less than the estimated market value for refinances is 43%. And then for purchases, again, including that green bar, which is the 1 to 10%, that's what gets us up to that number. So that's why we're saying in total, 43 and 42% are coming in less than the appraised value. But the 12, 13, 18, and 7 is showing the ones that are significantly less. So that's 20% or more below the actual appraised value, or above, sorry. Good comment from Sophie, pick up the dog poop. As an appraiser, I can tell you when I have to walk around backyards and I'm dodging situations back there, it certainly makes it easier if it's a clean backyard. And then we had another comment from in the private chat. Do you think that this type of market will continue? People are going in with no conditions because they have zero chance of getting the house. This can be dangerous where people are offering hundreds of thousands of dollars over asking, and I'm assuming appraisers are taking this data into account when valuing the home. So this has been, again, I don't want to speak for the rest of the country because we've seen relatively normal market conditions with condition, like 2-week condition periods in the prairies, in the Atlantic provinces. You've got your home inspection condition, your financing condition. We've seen these no condition offers pretty much in BC, Quebec, and Ontario for the last few years. So do I think that's going to change anytime soon? No. Again, that's my personal opinion. It's, again, people are buying. They've been feeling, again, the realtors talk about this all the time. The brokers, I'm sure you all know this, is people are going in because they've lost out on homes. They know that there's other like sort of bidding wars going on, and you know they really want the property, and you put the conditions in, and it's almost like a kiss of death in some markets in terms of getting the property. Do real estate professionals think that it's wise? Again, my personal opinion is you know, everyone would like to have a deal done properly, but just with the crazy market conditions, it's unfortunately something that many people are missing out on. Are appraisers factoring this into value? So again, when we talk about the EMVs, and many conversations I've had with appraisers over the past few months is, you know, when they see an appraisal order come in where the property was listed for $1 million and it's sold for 1.8, there's sometimes a hesitance on their part to accept the order because they know that it's outside of the market value. And, you know, they don't always want to be the bearer of bad news. It's difficult to support it. And just, you know, the amount of work that goes in to try and find comparables that don't support those values sometimes can be challenging. So appraisers definitely factored in. Appraisals are a point in time valuation. So even though we know markets are rapidly appreciating, they can't sort of forecast when they're doing a value for financing. So they can't say like in 6 months, I think this property is going to be worth this. It's the point in time value based on the actual sales that they have. So, you know, it's definitely a challenging time to be appraisers in some of these markets, knowing that people are bidding unrealistically. There's not sales to support, and, you know, if they appraise and the sale goes through, that's now the new benchmark for the market. So there's certainly a lot of challenges to being an appraiser right now. They factor it in as best they can, but you know, it's challenging for brokers, it's challenging for customers, it's challenging for realtors just to sort of take in everything that's happening with the market. So we try and help provide as most up-to-date data as we can to help support appraisers and brokers and our lender partners. But some markets are just so difficult to keep a finger on because values are changing so rapidly and all over the place and just so quickly.
Thank you, Stacey. And there's a couple of questions here for me that I'll make sure I address, but if I can take 2 seconds to do a bit of a public service announcement. Like Stacey said, we've got some serious challenges with the volumes right now. The appraisers are under extreme pressure. And I know your lenders are saying the same thing, but I promise you, I speak to brokers all day. We are honestly doing our very best to get your order assigned. Working with a group of folks like in the appraiser world that are extremely busy. And Stacey, I'm sure you alluded to some facts. There are some markets where, there were very few appraisers. And so, they're in a very difficult position where they're trying to meet with the demand and they just don't have the capacity. So be kind and be patient, but we're here to help you. So call me if you have any questions, and I, we'll do our very best. So that's the end of the public service announcement about that.
Yeah. Just sorry, just jump in there. Yeah. Like again, we're looking constantly to expand our network, help arm our appraisers with tools to be able to do things in a more effective and efficient manner. But again, a lot of the demand is in markets where an appraiser may have seen 1 or 2 orders a week. And now again, with the exodus of people from the major cities, a lot of these appraisers are not used to the volumes, and it's helping them sort of better cope with it, figure out how we can perhaps help them schedule, like looking into all of the options that we can do. But it's certainly sort of unprecedented in some of these markets outside of the city. Like if all of the orders were coming in Toronto, like they historically have been, it would certainly be an easier process. But we're working with our network and our partners to expand to make sure that we do have the coverage and really support our appraisers, because they're feeling as crazy as everyone else within the industry. So just making sure that we support them to support you guys. That's what we're hoping for.
Thanks, Stacey. Okay, so a couple of questions. Do we have an alliance with all lenders? We've got a list on our website of all the lenders that we do business with and that we work with. We are constantly looking at increasing that list for you so that it's kind of one-stop shopping. I would say the last of the Mohicans for us is Scotia. We would love to work with them. A lot of our broker partners are great advocates for us. So if you want to give them a little shout on our behalf, we would certainly not, turn that away. But we've got a really full suite of lenders that we deal with, including, in the private space as well. So that was a great question. Another question is, do we have the opportunity to change or request our appraiser through RPS? So the short answer is yes. When you have, and it really depends on the lender. So for example, and not to just choose, but let's say Merrick's or TD, based on their investor platform and how they do business, they do not allow brokers to choose their appraiser. And that's kind of why appraisal management companies like RPS came into existence, is because we were that wall between the broker and the appraiser chatting. And because I remember as a lender being able to call the appraiser and say, can you appraise this house? And this is the value I'm looking for. If it didn't come in, I would call them. Well, the regulators don't love that kind of conversation where the salespeople like myself back in the day would try and, not coerce. I didn't want to say I was coercing anybody, but, maybe just gently pushing them to what I needed the property to come in at. So a lot of lenders are not super comfortable with that. That's why the appraisal management company exists, to be that wall. So in those cases, no, we make that choice for you. But where the appraiser, you're allowed to choose your appraiser, whether it's MCAP, RMG, First National, the options will drop down for you. So you'll be able to choose your appraiser based on your experience, and it's just as easy to do that. And you also have, even though you can go to them directly, you certainly get now the house price tracker report, which is kind of nice every 6 months that you get. Let me see if there's any other questions.
Yeah, I see one here. I understand that appraisers are turning off their link to AMCs because they can earn more on their own or just too busy. This is a challenge we have with needing to use them. Any thoughts on this? Is there a minimum number of orders that appraisers need to pick up to stay on the RPS list? So no, there is not a minimum number of orders they need to pick up. RPS assigns as per appraiser availability. We're certainly looking at people's workload, work in progress capacity, and certainly all of the things that would go into assigning. So again, if we know that someone's over capacity, we've built in mechanisms so that we're not going to pile it on them and then certainly put them under stress or impact the customer's deal or the broker's deal. So there's no minimum number. We certainly don't penalize people if they don't take a certain number a month. Do appraisers make more outside of AMC business? Certainly it depends on, the type of work that they're doing. So someone who's doing only litigation work for matrimonial separations or estates would certainly get a different fee than someone who's doing a financing appraisal, because there's different levels of detail that need to go into it. Again, it's up to the appraiser in terms of the volume and mix of work that they want to do, but we're not seeing people turn it off because they can make more elsewhere. And again, it's just all dependent on the way the appraiser wants to do business. But financing appraisals is the biggest piece. I believe the last I checked for residential appraisers, 70% of it is for mortgage financing. The amount of, or I guess the number of lenders that accept reports outside of the AMC is certainly a lot less than it used to be. So perhaps they could be getting work direct from brokers, but the majority of appraisal, CRA residential appraisers work is done through AMCs for financing purposes. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, these are good questions, tough ones. There's another one here. Is it a myth that the appraisal on a purchase will come in at the purchase price in today's climate in Ontario? Is it unrealistic to believe this anymore? I might let Stacey also chime in on that one. Yeah, that's a tough one. I think, being in this industry for so long, I think we always had that expectation that the market was correct. And, based on supply and demand, the purchase price was what the market will bear, and that is what we could reasonably expect. In a market that's moving at this pace with, and like Stacey said, we're in unprecedented times, not just in terms of the volume and not just about the emotional purchasing of clients, but these folks are making life changes now in terms of where they want to live. There's a lot at stake. So there are some decisions that are being made, I think, in terms of, what you're willing to spend or pay for that piece of whatever it is you're looking for during this time, during a pandemic and lockdown. I don't know if it's a myth. I think we need to set the expectation with clients that if it is a bidding war and they know they've got to come in and compete, that, the appraisal may not match what what that bidding war created in terms of a purchase price. But maybe I'll let, from a more data perspective, have Stacey comment on that as well.
Yeah, and so just to touch on that, when we think about, I know it's always been a long-standing myth that why did I get an appraisal from like lenders, brokers, realtors? Why did we get an appraisal if it just came in at the purchase price? And as Geeta alluded to, historically, the purchase price has been an indication of market value. When you think about it from a lending standpoint, even if the appraiser came in $20,000 above the purchase price, the way most lenders work is that the lending value is the lesser of the appraised value and purchase price. So there really is, if the purchase price is supported, there's no point in, I guess there's no benefit to tacking it on and coming in higher, because there's nothing that can really be done with it at the time of closing. But again, the appraisers take a look at the range. If the purchase price is supported, assuming that it's arm's length transaction with educated buyers and sellers, certainly the purchase price would make sense. In terms of bidding wars, appraisers can't really put a value on emotional purchases. So we look at some of these where, people have lost out on 20 houses. So like, we're going all in on this one. Like, the appraiser can't quantify the emotional piece of that transaction. So they look at the data and the comparable sales that are available. Certainly we would hope they would comment and perhaps interview the customers and understand maybe why they did go in a bit higher. And like conversations with realtors, the broker will give them that information. And, it's best if they can include that in the report so the lender can understand. And then again, the conversation can be had with the customer and the lender to understand why there was a shortfall and what can be done about it. So I think there's a lot of pieces that go into that puzzle. But yes, in the rapidly changing markets, appraisers, we're hoping that they comment on why they couldn't support the purchase price as opposed to just leaving, like coming in $500,000 short and not putting a note in the report about it. I think that's what we're really working with our network on, is to make sure that there's an analysis of the sale agreement and they're commenting on why they came in short, and interviews of brokers and realtors on each transaction certainly will help everyone in that process.
Good point. I mean, as a salesperson, I feel you. Like when the appraiser comes in on the value shy of a purchase price, I would like to know. I think it enhances conversations with your realtors, who are your, they're your centers of influence, they're your referral sources, and then with your clients, how do you gently provide that information in a way that makes sense, so that you can speak intelligently about why the value came in the way it came in. So I agree totally. I think we have time for one more quick question. Sorry, Stacey, I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Well, and I was just going to say, like, that's the challenge, is a lot of customers, a lot of them are first-time home buyers, so don't even understand what the implications are if the appraised value does come in light. So I think that's one of the key things that, as we move forward in markets with conditions such as we have now, is actually explaining, like, what is going to happen if the appraised value does come in light. Like, do you have a backfall? Like, what's the plan, especially if you've gone in with no conditions? I think that's certainly a bit of a gap in the marketplace for consumers. We all saw it in 2016 in BC, in 2017 in Ontario, when the foreign buyers tax came in, and we saw sort of market values temporarily sort of plummet. Everyone was losing their deposits. It was all over the news. So I think that's just one of the key things to keep in mind now, is there is a possibility the appraised value in these overheated markets will not come in, and sort of how do we discuss that with the customer up front to make sure that there's less surprises if it does come in short.
Yeah, thank you. And so just quickly, that last question is regarding, and we get this a lot, my appraiser came from 2 hours away. This is a remote area. Sometimes they don't know the markets. How do you determine that? I will say that I know there's a couple things that can happen. I know it might seem like someone's coming from an other area. A lot of times that's the company is located in a certain area, but they have folks that work in those areas. So we try very hard to make sure that is the case. If you know for certain, like I'm in Barrie, Ontario, if somebody was coming from Barrie to go and appraise Sudbury, Ontario, well, yeah, that would be an issue. Please bring that to our attention, but it's based on postal code. It's based on, availability of the appraiser. So we do look for local folks. So even if the address says they live in Toronto, the appraiser will be the one that will be looking after those areas. They should live and understand those markets, but certainly it's an offline conversation, just in case you had any specifics that you wanted to share. And can you block appraisers if you don't want to do use an appraiser? Stacey, just plug your ears for 1 sec. So you can. We can, on exception, do that. On exception, it has to be a situation where you've had some difficulty, and we understand as salespeople, you want to deal with people like and trust. We have no problem with that. Keeping in mind that you can't also choose them. So you could say, listen, I can't deal with ABC. It's a local. We've had 25 run-ins. I appreciate that. We can look at fixing that for you. But if it's a lender that does not allow choice, we cannot now go and choose somebody. And you can't say, well, I don't want to use all these 5 people, because then that means only one person is left. So that you can't kind of play with the system and do that. But certainly we can work things out. That's where my conversation with you, we need to have offline. So please don't hesitate to give me a call. And we can chat and have those conversations. I think we're right at the 2 o'clock mark. I want to, this has been some great discussion. Great questions. Again, I know that Laura is recording this. If there's anything that you want to reach out to myself or Stacey for any further clarification, don't hesitate. Again, we appreciate you joining us today. There was a big crowd today. We really appreciate it. You took in a lot of information today. We wish you tremendous success. We want you to stay safe and take care of yourselves. And we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stacey.
Bye.
Thanks, Laura.